Former Home Secretary James Cleverly says visa rule changes he brought in are behind the UK's biggest drop in net migration over a 12-month period. Official figures show that it halved to 431,000 in 2024. Mr Cleverly claims Labour slammed the policies at the time, but are now trying to take credit for the outcome. The Conservative MP for Braintree and former Home Secretary, former Foreign Secretary as well, James Cleverly, joins me now. James, good afternoon to you.
Ian, hi.
Nice to have you with us. I started off the programme by doing a bit of monologue about congratulations to Keir Starmer. Isn't he brilliant? It was tongue-in-cheek stuff, of course. I think half the country thought I was serious. Clearly, that isn't the case. I mean, I'm sure Labour, every party does it to a degree, will claim some victory on this, but there's no way around this. I mean, this drop is down to when you were in office. I mean, that's demonstrable. It's evidential. We can see it with our own eyes. So what you were trying to do did, in fact, work.
Well, the ONS themselves have made it very clear that the big areas of reduction are as a direct result of people coming here on work visas and people coming here as students not being able to bring family members with them anymore. That was a big driver to the increase in figures, and that's why these figures have come down. And those changes I put in place when I was Home Secretary. When Rishi Sunak moved me from the Foreign Office, he made it clear that his expectation of me as a new Home Secretary was to bring these immigration figures down. So I worked with other government departments, I worked with the Treasury, I had his backing and support. We brought these changes in. I was criticised by Labour at the time, but now we're seeing that they worked. And had the Labour government continued to implement the policies that I put in place, we would see these figures come down even further in the future, but they haven't. They've actually not implemented all the changes that I was going to put in place. So this is good news. We need these figures to come down further, and we need the Labour government to start taking immigration seriously and not just ride on the coattails of the former government.
When you first arrived in the Home Office, I remember, I think it was David Blunkett that said in an interview once that, you know, you sort of end up doing a PhD in international terrorism, domestic terror, goodness knows what, in about 24 hours. You know, you are briefed, and the briefing never really stops, of course, because there's all sorts of things coming across your desk. But the moment that paper came along and said that you can you can come from another country, do a degree in geography at Durham University and bring your nan with you, did you not for a moment sort of slightly discombobulate and think, hang on a second, you can bring relatives with you as a student? I mean, we understand it if you're a doctor coming over for 10 years, you're going to bring your family, but a student, how did we ever get to that place?
Well, the international student market is an important and quite lucrative part of any country's economy. So foreign students bring money with them. It's good for the UK economy, and that's great. But the truth is that for a number of universities, they had slipped into the habit of selling themselves as a method to come to the UK rather than as a great place to study and get a degree. So student visas are meant to be temporary. People come here, they study, they contribute to the economy, they enjoy their time in the UK, and then when they go back home, these are the kind of people that perhaps will increasingly do business with the UK, that they will, you know, send their children in the future to study in the UK. That's great. But if they're bringing their whole family, if they are relying on housing support, if they're relying on the NHS, those are people who are not contributing to the UK economy, and the numbers were too big and the contribution was too small. So the changes that I put in place increased the salary threshold for people coming here to work so that they weren't undercutting British workers, and made sure that the people who are coming here temporarily to study were bringing themselves and their brains, but not their whole family.
Yeah. And, of course, this juxtaposes with the other news we had today, that yesterday 800 people crossed the Channel. This is seen as illegal immigration, which seems to have, well, I mean, everyone says they've given it a go. I remember talking to a former permanent secretary at the Home Office, a man you will know well, saying, you know, we're on this all the time. We are literally trying all the time to solve this problem. No one has really succeeded. Why do you suppose that is? You know, we can do all sorts of things. We can send Katy Perry into space in a rocket, but we can't stop some boats coming over from Calais.
this was never easy, and I never pretended that it was going to be easy. My real frustration with the Labour Party is they thought that they were terribly clever, so much more clever than the Tories, and that all they needed to do was to get into government and somehow, magically, this problem would start going away. So they brought out this phrase that they were going to smash the gangs. Well done. We'd already been working on that through the National Crime Agency, through the security services, and a load of conversations that I had with other countries when I was Foreign Secretary. So that was nothing new. But what they also did was they scrapped the Rwanda agreement, which was a deterrent, broadcast to the smuggling gangs that they were doing that, and in doing so, presented the people smuggling community with a real incentive to come to the UK. So my real frustration is that they set about doing less in the hope that somehow they would achieve more. They didn't take it seriously. They were arrogant. They were complacent, and sadly now we are seeing the worst results on record for illegal small boat migration.
But we still saw tens of thousands under the Conservatives, and no matter what was going on, I remember Sajid Javid saying, this is an emergency, Priti Patel, Suella Braverman, I mean, the list goes on. Nobody said, what was it's almost like an episode of Roadrunner when you're determined to find the solution to the problem, but no one can quite actually stop the boats. And of course, your Prime Minister Rishi Sunak made a big thing about that whenever he spoke. The slogan was written there, stop the boats. No boats stopped. They seemed to increase, James. What was from a Home Secretary perspective, what was literally standing in your way? There must have been conversations about, do we send the Navy in? What do we do? Do we get the military involved? The SAS, goodness knows what.
Well, look, the challenge with this is that it's complicated. And I've had people say to me, why don't we just send the Royal Navy in? Which sounds tough and sounds effective. But when you say, well, and what would the Royal Navy do? Because they're not going to shoot these people. They're not going to send them to the bottom. They would have to do the same as the RNLI, because there are international rules which govern how captains of boats and captains of ships behave at sea. And the thing is, we wrote those rules. The International Maritime Organization is the only UN body based in the UK. We're a maritime nation. So the rules of the sea that we wrote means that you have to do everything you can to save life at sea if that life is at risk. What we need to do, and what we were looking to do with the Rwanda scheme, was to deter the people smugglers, make it clear their business model was not going to be profitable. That was part of the Rwanda scheme, whilst also negotiating returns agreements, as we did with Albania. And we had a very good relationship with Albania, which saw illegal migration from Albania reduced by about 90%. And it is, it was a constant challenge. But as I say, my real frustration was the Labour Party clearly thought it was going to be really easy. They clearly thought that all they had to do was replace the Conservatives in government and this problem would go away. They are doing less, and because they are doing less, and because this is a difficult enough circumstance at the best of times, we're now seeing those small boat arrival numbers go through the roof. The number of people in the number of asylum seekers in hotels going up. The cost of accommodating them going up. All the things that they promised they would sort out like that, all getting worse.
Yes, smash the gangs is a completely ludicrous slogan. I agree with that. But do you think stop the boats was equally inept, given that you didn't stop the boats?
Well, we made it clear that this was what we were trying to achieve. And we were moving heaven and earth. The Rwanda scheme, which I know was contentious, I know it was novel, it was massively criticised by Labour at the time. They did everything they can to block it. We had the Supreme Court trying to block it. We were working to try and get this up and running because we wanted to explore every avenue. The Labour Party scrapped it as soon as they entered government. And what are we looking at now? Keir Starmer desperately trying to replicate the Rwanda agreement with any other country other than Rwanda, because he's, of course, really damaged the relationship with that friendly country. And so he's now admitting that we need to find new and innovative ways of dealing with this. Yeah. They had an innovative way. They inherited it from us. And before they even gave it a proper chance to work, they scrapped it to get some cheap headlines with the left of British politics, and in doing so sent a really corrosive signal to people smugglers that Britain is open for business.
Just a final story here, James. I've got to ask you about the Chagos deal, of course. There's been all sorts of to and froing. Through the middle of the night, courts were sitting, trying to debate and discuss what should happen with this attempt to stop it, an 11th hour challenge. And then, of course, the government lawyers went in and said, no, we're going to, this is the evidence. And now it can go ahead. Whenever I talk to a Labour politician about what it's all about and why we need to give the Chagos Islands away, etc., they often point to you and say, well, ask James Cleverly, because he was the man that essentially wrote this. It's all on his watch. Is that true or false?
Well, of course, it's nonsense. If I'd wanted to give these islands away, I would have done it whilst I was Foreign Secretary. The fact is that the court ruling, the ICJ ruling, which was a non-binding ruling from a court that does not have jurisdiction over our relationship with Commonwealth nations, came up with a ruling. Our view, the Conservative government at the time, was that we should speak with the Mauritians in good faith, but with no guarantee of what the outcomes of those talks would be. And ultimately, we did not come to an agreement which worked for the UK. And as the UK Foreign Secretary, if I can't do a deal that works in our interest, then I don't do the deal, which is why I never signed off a deal. David Cameron, who was my successor as Foreign Secretary, never signed off a deal. But within weeks of entering government, Keir Starmer, whose close personal friend, Philippe Sands, was on the payroll of the Mauritian government as their legal advisor, suddenly, out of nowhere, they decided that actually, you know what, we can do a deal. Now, I don't know what they agreed to, but I know it must have been something that I had said no to in the past. And now we're in a situation where we are sacrificing sovereignty to a country. Mauritius never controlled the Chagos Islands. They were never part of Mauritius. And we don't know what protections are in place from a government which is very close to China, that has a very, very active military posture in that part of the world. It is a dirty deal done behind the scenes. We don't know how much we're paying for it. We don't know what protections are in place. And the Labour Party saying, oh, we are just doing what James did. Well, what I did was say no to a deal.
So you think it's possible that Keir Starmer is doing this as a favour for a mate?
Well, I don't know. In fact, none of us know what his motivations are. But Keir Starmer has in the past said that he believed that the Chagos Islands belong to Mauritius. Wrong. Philippe Sands, his close friend, says the Chagos Islands belong to Mauritius. He was wrong. We never conceded that point in the conversations that we had with Mauritius. And yet suddenly, only weeks after gaining office, with all the other challenges, with the conflict in the Middle East, with the situation in Ukraine, they prioritized sacrificing the sovereignty of a key military base ahead of all these other things that they could have done, because I think this is a long-standing passion of Keir Starmer and his Islington dinner party circuit, who have never felt comfortable with the Union Jack flying in the top corner of flags around the world.
Yeah, I kind of sense also, I tend to agree with that, and there is that feeling, a lot of people saying, well, what next? Is it Gibraltar? Is it the Falklands?
Well, they keep saying, oh, no, those are not on the table. But the point is, they have now demonstrated to the world in this negotiation, as in so many others, that under any kind of pressure, they roll over. This is a really, really negative signal they're sending to the world. Just as we're seeing with their U-turn on winter fuel allowance, because their backbenchers got a little bit shirty, Keir Starmer and the Labour government do not have the resolve to act in the national best interest, all our adversaries, competitors around the world can sense that, and it's going to make maintaining Britain's interests around the world a whole load harder, because the whole world has seen that Keir Starmer rolls over at the first sign of pressure.
James Cleverly, great to have you on, sir. We will speak again, I hope. He is, of course, Conservative MP for Braintree, former Foreign Secretary, former Home Secretary, on a couple of issues that were also across his table during his time in office.